Okay, let's call the HR committee meeting to order. It's 5 p.m. We can start with introductions. My name is Shane Blazer. I'm the chairman.
Scott Kellogg, alderperson.
Joseph, committee member.
Sarah Christensen, consultant.
Dawn Urban, HR.
Jennifer Gossick, city clerk.
Right. Formality's been taken care of. First item we're going to do is review and consider for approval revised longevity and holidays policy. You.
All right. Well, this is actually very easy. So these are the first two documents in your packets, and I am literally adding or removing 3 or 4 words. And basically, what we're doing is aligning these policies with the separation policy. So on the longevity policy, we are requiring a 30-day notice when individuals retire. So I'm making the language match or mirror that policy. And on the holidays policy, we had not allowed individuals who gave their notice. Once you actually provided notice, you cannot take those 2 floating holidays. But part of the separation policy was that you can use those up until the date of termination or the date of retirement. So what you see in the red on these 2 policies are the very slight changes that are being made to align with that policy. And it's pretty straightforward, but if anyone has questions about it.
Joseph.
I'll make a motion to approve both policies.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second to approve both the longevity and the holiday policies. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next item is to review and consider for approval an extension of the city's contract with Lorelei Fuhrer for inspection services.
All right. So this is the 3rd attachment in your packet, and basically I had used the referral that Adam Tagan had submitted last May. And the quote or the proposal from Lorelei, as the quote still stands and the price would not be changing. The reason we're meeting is Adam would like to extend this contract. Lorelei is still actively helping us clear up that backlog from not having a city inspector. So there is a little backlog still to be cleared up, and we are asking that this be extended. I believe Adam had wanted this extended through December 31. There's nothing really that would be changing. We would get a new letter from Lorelei with a new date.
So do we have somebody on staff that provides these services yet, or does
Currently, we have 1 city inspector.
Okay.
We are ready to make an offer to a 2nd city inspector.
Okay.
That position has been vacant for a little while. So yes, we're actively recruiting for it.
And so will that inspector be able to have the electrical certification to do electrical inspections and those type of things, or are we still going to be short on some of the things that they can inspect?
So in time, that individual will have the residential, the 4 certifications for residential.
Okay.
And we should be in good shape.
Perfect. Question?
You'll be leaving soon. Who's taking your place, and if we had to do interviews and things like that?
So, yeah, if you need to do interviews, actually Sarah Anderson, my assistant, has been coordinating all the interviews, and Morgan Tauschek, the HR generalist, has interviewed and has sat in on interviews and can do that.
Okay, I was just curious.
So. Sure. Any other
Sounds good.
questions?
Anybody have
Do you want to add anything?
No, I was just going to, the second part of your question is not on the agenda, but I'm certainly happy to talk about it offline. I know the chairman and I just talked about this right before our meeting, before your meeting here, just talking about transition and next steps in that. So, yeah, I don't have anything else to add besides that. Happy to discuss it though.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a motion and a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve continuing our contract with Lorelei Fuhrer for a rate of $50 per hour. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion approved.
Through December 31.
Correct, through December 5th. The next item would be for the clerk to discuss and approve an increase in the hourly pay rate for the election workers for the future of city elections.
Right, so I have included in your packets a list of what the different municipalities in Wood County pay their poll workers, their election inspectors, and also their chief inspectors. Our chiefs just had a raise, so I'm not looking at that. I also included the city of Stevens Point and what they pay. So I'm asking for an increase from $9.25 an hour to $11 an hour to be in the same range as the other municipalities. And I know they have not had a raise in at least 5 years. I don't know before that how long it's been. Shane, do you have any idea?
It's been before even I was there.
Yeah.
The last thing I remember doing was the chief inspectors.
Right.
And now, does this cause any compression between the workers and the chief?
No, they just got a raise. I did talk to them about it last election.
Because technically they'll be at a $4 an hour difference. Okay.
Yeah. So they know that I'm asking for it. I talked to them before I did this just to see what their situation was, so.
I couldn't agree more with this item. Those individuals work a long day.
They do. They work open to close, so it's 6 o'clock until after the polls close and beyond, so.
10 or 11 at night.
Yep.
Anyone have any questions for Claire?
No, there's obviously enough funds in the budget. So.
We'll make sure there are, yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the rate increase from $9.25 to $11 an hour for the poll workers.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the pay increase for the election workers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item is to discuss and review a proposal from Sarah Christensen that addresses next step as a follow-up to an employee engagement survey. And she's here to present her recommendation, and we thank you for coming over.
Sure. Anybody wants to grab a copy here?
Oh, yeah, what?
No,
Oh.
take one if you have
I was just looking at
one. That's yours, Shane. That's fine. I don't need one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And this
I
is
think I have
just a point of reference. We can amend, we can change, we can suggest. It's just kind of a working document to help us move forward. After the presentation, I talked with Dawn, and she indicated that you guys were interested in a little more information about why employees answered the way they did on the Great Place to Work question. And I agree that that's a great place to start because that's an overarching kind of data point. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about, you know, what the objectives were there. And we kind of came to a landing point of, let's find out what it would take for them to greatly or strongly agree that this is a great place to work. Let's find out what the expectations are that they have that are not being met. Now, in doing that, we're probably going to get expectations that are unrealistic, and we're going to have to manage that, right? And we're going to have to help them understand what's possible and what's not. But it's better to understand what their expectations are that are not being met so that we can address them. Dawn told me that you guys were thinking about focus groups, which I think is a great idea. Bringing together either one focus group or multiple focus groups to really do 4 things. And the first thing I want to do is really dig into what are the attributes of a great place to work. What would you consider, to the employees, what would you consider a great place to work? And I usually have them kind of imagine that they're going into a municipality that they've never experienced before, and they're going in to determine if it's a great place to work or not a great place to work. And so what are the criteria that they're going to look for, and what is the evidence that backs up their evaluation of that criteria? So really, you know, someone says, well, they pay great. Okay, well, what's going to tell you that? How do you compare that? How do you know that the pay is great? And why does that make that a great place to work? Okay. Usually pay does come up, but in the end it doesn't hold water as what makes it a great place. So we would address that in that meeting. The next thing I would ask them to do is to look at which of these attributes are present here in Wisconsin Rapids. What are the attributes that we have that it makes this a great place to work? Because some people did agree it was a great place to work. And what are those specific criteria? And then of the other criteria that we said was important, where do we have some gaps that we need to work on? What do we need to leverage and what do we need to work on? And then after that, have them decide, okay, we can't, spoon out the ocean all at one time, so what would be the priorities? If you had that magic wand, what one or two things would you have float to the top that we really pay attention to in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? And then the last thing I would ask them to do is talk about, well, what's your role as an employee in making this a great place to work? What responsibility do you have to your coworkers, to your customers, to your organization, and how can we communicate that throughout the organization to help this process, because we're all in the ship together. So what would that look like? Again, it depends on if we want one focus group to do all that work or if we want to have a couple different groups work on that. But my question to you is, does that hit the areas that you were looking for? I know you guys wanted more information. Do you think that would provide you with what you were looking for?
Yeah, my metaphor was like I go to the doctor and he says I'm dying. But is it a heart attack? Is it blood pressure? Is it cancer? I don't know. And the results that we've got, it's just so ambiguous that you can't grab onto it.
Okay.
And so it's like, so what do we do about it?
Okay, I agree with that, but I think also from the POV interviews, we got a couple really key points that I think will show up in this focus group. I think we have half of the ingredients we need, but we need to research what are the other half.
How would you develop those focus groups? I mean, who would make up the focus groups?
I would want Dawn's help on that, or Sarah, because you guys know your culture better. I like to encourage that we have positive people, we have naysayers, we have believers, we have resistors that come together and can give different points of view. So I would encourage that we ask for volunteers, but I would also cherry pick some folks that we think are really going to add value to that conversation.
Would you mix departments? Or
I would think yes.
Yeah,
City Hall
I would.
versus the garage, I don't know.
There's pros and cons to doing it both ways. One of the pros is we want to look at this organizationally, and our data that we have is very departmentalized. It's a very different experience depending on what team you're on, so that brings those perspectives together. But one of the cons is if I'm in a department that rated very positively on this question, and there's someone sitting next to me who rated very negatively, we're not going to really agree on things. So it's going to become a point of contention for, well, what really is it that we want? So there's pros and cons to both sides that we would have to manage through that. And maybe we can do both. Maybe we start out with objective number one at a department level, and then we come together as an organization and say, okay, what do we have, what don't we have, what do we agree with, what don't we agree with as an organization? Because the individual experience is very dependent on which department you're in. It was very varied.
I guess for me, I don't know how the committee feels, but I think I don't know how it can be worked in, but I would like to see more than 25 pointed interviews.
Yep.
I'd really like to see everybody participate, whether they come in and say, I don't want to be here and walk out, but I don't like 20. I didn't like 25, and I didn't like the breakup of it just didn't seem like that. So do we really, the information that we received, is it consistent across the board? Those thoughts. I don't know if we can somehow incorporate that into.
I fully agree with you, and Dawn and I talked about that. And our first idea was maybe we do more POV interviews. But I don't know that we're gonna get any different than what we got the first time, so we came back with this idea of where, instead of making point of view interviews mandatory, that we cherry pick for this committee. We can still do those individual interviews, because I agree with you, 25 was not enough to really get a holistic point of view.
I do think we should come up with a percentage standard. You want X percentage from each department participating.
Yeah, something, you know, because I've heard from other employees who have said they would like to see more interviews, you know, people that have participated. And
Well, we could
even
definitely.
just saying I don't want to participate is at least participating.
We could definitely do that, or we could look at, for the first objective here, that we do start departmental and we make it mandatory. In the bigger departments, we might have to split up into smaller groups, but we make it a mandatory piece where they have to come and say, what would greatness look like here? Because that, sometimes the participation is just as important as the information we get.
Yeah, because I agree with Scott though, is, you know, there's nothing you can really grab on and say, okay, we can fix this, or we can work on this. And
So you say meetings between September and October, so is it like one a week or two a week and then 4 meetings, or how many?
It depends on the format we want to take. If we want all employees involved, obviously it's going to take a little longer. If we want to do separate meetings, it's going to take a little longer. If we want to do all of this together with one group, we can get it done in one day. It might be a full day, but we can, you know, so time frame, it's really dependent on what direction we go and what scope we take.
What have you found to be the best?
The more you can involve employees, the better, obviously. And I kind of think in this situation, that departmental piece is probably where we want to start, because it was such a varied experience, and kind of identify more of the variances. Why was this department so positive and this department so on the other side? And then cherry pick folks from those departments to come together and say, why do we have such a big gap? Is this gap realistic? What does it look like organizationally? So I think maybe do, you know, 1 or 2 hour departmental work for that first question, and then bring together a focus group that maybe you choose who those folks are. But if we ask them to prioritize and to talk about the employee work that needs to be done, we also have to be ready to do some follow-up on what they say are the priorities. I don't want to bring together a focus group and have them say, okay, these are the 2 things we really want looked at, and then have it drop, because then we've done more harm than good.
absolutely.
What do you guys think of that, of starting at the department level and then pulling together a focus group?
I'd rather see that, because I'd like to see something that we can grab onto
Yep.
and maybe address, or I doubt if it's even realistic, or there's got to be some realistic things in there that will change people's attitudes.
And I would facilitate those
Some.
conversations, and I would put some parameters on it. One of the first parameters I would put is that we're not going to talk about salaries and wages. You know, that's off the table. That's a whole different format, so let's not bring that there. If they come in and say, well, we want only part-time jobs instead of full-time jobs, you know, I'll facilitate the realism there and guide them toward priorities that can actually be actionable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, you know, not everybody's gonna get a Starbucks in their office, and and those don't make a difference anyway. Because what I've found, the role of the facilitator, one of the roles that I have to play is helping them understand that their wants don't necessarily equal what they need. So we'll have them communicate what they want, but I will guide them towards what they really need. Because things like, you know, ping pong in the break room sounds great, but it doesn't drive what we really want to drive. When you come back and ask the question again of, is this a great place to work, it doesn't move the dial. So I will steer them away from those things and help them understand what really moves the dial.
Thoughts?
Well, I guess one concern that you mentioned was basically politics. But being a government, you know, a municipality, I don't think that's something you can ever get away from.
We addressed that in the strategic planning. When they talked about politics, what they were really telling me was conflicting agendas. Not that they're, one side or the other, it's that we get direction from here and direction from here, and they're not in alignment, we don't know how to move forward. So when there's disagreements at that political level, it makes it very difficult for them to do their job. So it's not necessarily politics, that's maybe the term they use, but it's more vision and priorities and alignment. That, yes, we're gonna have political disagreements all the time, that's what our democracy is all about, but once we come to a conclusion at that political level, then for the implementation there needs to be alignment and vision. And that's what was lacking.
Well, the mayor and I were just talking about this very thing, and I agree, because I think sometimes, as I told him, is I think staff pushes stuff to the council, and we really don't have any buy-in because we've never had any part of it, and then we debate it, and up or down vote it happens, and they get shot down, and staff obviously feels frustration because they put all the time into it, but we weren't part of the discussion if we even want to go in that direction, where I think maybe some discussions such as that might help, because if staff gets the feeling that council isn't really buying into it and really are passionate about that, then they don't have to spend time doing it and trying to sell it to us when we shoot it down anyways.
I found that the employees I talked to, and again, we'll learn more as we do more, but the employees I talked to, when I asked them what does success look like, they really struggled. They don't feel like that they have a general direction of where we're headed, and that we're just different projects, different things coming in, and it's getting very overwhelming because it doesn't fit under a game plan, so to speak. We're calling a lot of different plays, but we don't have a game plan. They feel. That may or may not be true, but that's what they feel. And I found that thriving organizations, although they have to swerve and weave and call audibles at the line, they generally have a game plan that helps them make those day-to-day decisions. And that may be there, employees just aren't understanding or being exposed to that.
And I think unfortunately how our system is here in Rapids, unfortunately I think the mayor ends up shouldering a lot of that kind of political ideas or game plan, or whichever direction we go in, and then staff tries to sell it to council along with the mayor, and we bounce back, and I don't think we're ever on the same page of we want Rapids to go in this direction, and how can we all drive that way,
and at this level,
it seems like we're bumping heads all the time.
At this level, we're probably always going to have that. But one of the things that is in my proposal here too is you need to have coaches, whether that's supervisor, director, whomever, who know how to communicate when an employee comes and says, "What the heck? I thought we were going here. Now we're going here. What the heck happened?" If you don't have somebody ready to walk them through that psychological shift, it turns into resentment, anger, frustration, when there might not be a need for that frustration. But if your supervisors don't understand or don't have those communication skills, or just say, deal with it, that's your job, then we kind of elevate that frustration level. So it's maybe not anything we need to be doing different at this level, we just need to have that communication and that support to guide people through those audibles, because there's always going to be that. The human brain doesn't like audibles, even when it's in their best interest.
Mayor, just a couple thoughts. I think your earlier comment about point of view interviews, I think I would ask Sarah, what's statistically significant? Because in all my training in education and statistics, there's a significant threshold, and that can be different things in different settings. What would you constitute a statistically significant focus group, representation of our employee base?
I like to get, for larger organizations, I like to get at least 10%. But I like to have it, across the organization. But that's for larger organizations. You guys are a smaller organization, so I like to see it up to probably 30–35%. What we got was high concentration in certain areas. So I don't know that we got a organizational perspective. We got very specific departmental perspective. So, you know, if you asked me what's my understanding of a department where we had, you know, 10 people, it would be higher than a department where we only had 1. So I think that's the statistical concern I have, is we didn't have the balance throughout the organization.
I think that's the concern I have going forward, really, in any of the engagement, is the expectation of employees, of those that show up, direct the conclusions, right? And in a democracy, that's how it works, right? We just know that. We know who shows up, that's what, you know, that's how it works. But I think in this case, the POV interviews were not reflective of statistically significant population of our employees. And those that were had maybe mistrusted or didn't place as much trust in the process are going to place less trust going forward if we don't go in with some of those expectations up front.
I
And I
agree.
think I'm really concerned about that, because folks place, those that participated place maybe great, you know, priority and trust in the whole deal, and I think we have to earn some of that back, right, before we maybe even take any particular direction here, to get their feedback on what they'd like to see the next steps be. Because if we're going to get engagement, that's about buy-in, and I don't sense we even have buy-in at this stage to get a level. It's almost going to be maybe an element of false engagement, like we're making. And believe me, I want to see us get there. I want to see us make sure that we are the great place to work. I just have some questions and reservations, if you will, on that regard.
I agree with you, and I hope I was clear on that in my presentation, that I didn't feel like we got the participation at the POV level that I would have liked. I think we can get that through the focus groups, or we can also do more point of view interviews. But I also don't want to continue to dig deeper and just get more information, because without taking some action with that,
Right.
because that elevates the expectations of the employees. Again, I think we have, in certain departments, we've got deeper dive than we do in others. But from the survey data, I feel like organizationally, we got great participation. And just to be honest with you guys, I have concerns over how we answered that question. So do we know what those concerns are? I think in certain areas, yes. In others, no. But there's also value in what are we doing right that I don't feel we got a great feel for. So that would come out of the focus groups as well. So what do we need to leverage? Why did you come to work here, and why are you still here? Because that's valuable too.
I guess for me personally, I'd like to see more interviews and then, you know, build on that through the focus groups, but I'd definitely like to see
Okay.
a lot more interviews.
I believe we're going to have to make them mandatory then.
I think, you know, if the mayor can direct the department heads to, you know, and if they're going to come in, I agree, you know, mandatory, but they come in and say, I don't want to participate, well, they participated technically. Cause,
Okay, and I will document that
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I
I
can
think-
keep track of.
you know, but I do think it's important that, you know, if we're going to go forward and actually address the concerns, we need to make sure that all the employees, and in council, I think we should be, since we're part of this too, I think there should be some element that we participate too, since
Okay.
we can be a hindrance or a help to the process, or.
And if they turn it down, they can't complain.
Right, exactly, you participated, you choose
That-
not to participate.
That's logical. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
I know.
Well, I wish it worked that way.
Yeah.
Joe, you got good thoughts there? You look like you're deep in thought.
I just don't know, I mean, I don't disagree with you, Shane, I don't know
You can.
forcing them to, like, making it mandatory would be, I don't know if that would hurt us more than what we're trying to fix though, but
Yeah.
otherwise, everything else, I think, yeah.
Is there a way to randomize a sample population? I think sort of in the early call out for interviews, when we wanted to make sure it was truly confidential, that it wasn't, oh, these people participated and we knew who they were. We tweaked on how people signed up to protect the confidentiality. I mean, you don't care if the person is so-and-so and they work here. I mean, you, from a statistically significant population, you should care. but you're not from here, you're not
Right.
connected to this community, so, you know, if all of us participate, it doesn't matter to you that we all, I mean, other than the statistically significant sample population of the survey, you know, so I think it's just a little bit easier for the consultant to play that role of, here's who we have, you know, here's the number of people I need to get, and I just need to call people up, you know, and not necessarily just calling people up, but just kind
When
of that.
we talk about surveys, I think that that's more the statistical reference pieces, because the POV is not an objective process, it's very subjective. And my concern with just jumping in and doing more of the same is that the reasons that they didn't participate the first time are still there. We haven't changed the reasons they didn't participate. So now if we start to force it, we're not going to get good information. You get good information when people come forward voluntarily. And that's where I think maybe the focus groups, where they have that support within a group environment and I can facilitate that conversation. Again, we're not going to get the objective information, but we are going to get more subjective. And then we can compare and say, well, you know, fire really didn't give us much. Maybe we need to come back and do more POV interviews at that point. I just feel like the reasons they didn't come forward in the first place are still there, whatever those might be. And if we force someone to participate, they're going to come and tell us what we want to hear. And we're going to get a skewed version.
So your recommendation is start with the focus groups and go from there?
And see what we get.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we need to double back at that point, because I predict that some departments will be really engaged and into this process and very positive, and others will be engaged and negative, and others won't be engaged, then we can look at where do we need more information. And then maybe we ask the department manager to choose a few people that that they encourage to come forward, and you know, we can ask them what made you reluctant. You know, I don't know.
Well,
I don't
think
know.
the confidentiality, I guess, that was my only, I guess, objection, so to speak, to the, because you know, telling someone you're going to participate and then documenting it if they decide not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could do that confidentially, maybe that'd be okay. But
The
then
very-
either way, don't they feel kind of like they're put in a
The very fact that the confidentiality was such a major issue tells me we need to come at this from a different angle,
right?
because that's still a concern. And that was an elevated concern.
Well, I would be worried. I mean, if I'm gonna, if I'm concerned about something or I have a perceived or real, something negative that I want to really voice and try to get corrected, I would be hesitant.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're concerned about potential retaliation, whether or not that.
And the
Yeah,
angle
yeah.
from the focus groups is not tell me what's wrong, it's tell me what it would look like when it's right. And so that's a little less intimidating
Yeah.
and risk-taking. There's an implied that, we'll change what's wrong, but and I tried to do that in the POV interviews, and it was very apparent that the culture is, well, we're gonna talk about what's wrong first. Because my first question is, tell me what success looks like, and they had no idea how to answer that question. And almost instantly started going to what was wrong. So I had to facilitate a lot of those conversations. If we come and say, okay, what would great look like? And help them kind of have a magic wand and dream a little instead of dealing with the current reality, maybe, I can't guarantee, but maybe that might give us a little more information. I totally predict we'll still get, well, here's what's wrong. Let me help you understand what's wrong. But hopefully we'll get an idea of what they think right would look like.
So in creating a focus group, do you open it up, you talked about a department. I would think you would open it up to anybody in the department, and from whoever volunteers, you may choose. I mean, you can't have maybe 25 people, you may have to have 10 or what have you, but
Well, what do you guys think
otherwise
about,
you're handpicking, and they're
Yeah.
gonna say, well, you cherry pick certain people.
what are your thoughts between all employees participate at the department level, which means we may have to have 3 different meetings within a department if it's bigger, or one department, one focus group? What are your thoughts there?
I myself would like to see more people try to participate and give us their opinion, because then, 30 people say the same thing, then there's more validity in that versus a couple naysayers maybe.
Yeah.
That's just my thoughts.
My preference would to be, just so that I can get personally a feel for who are the naysayers. I can pull out some of the folks that are probably not going to participate very readily. I can direct questions at them. I would like to see maybe we do all employees at the department level, and then from that come up with a focus group to do 2, 3, 4.
And that answered the lack of participation in the initial interviews and trying to
Yeah,
get everybody.
it's a team activity.
Right, now
So
it's a team.
as a
Everybody
team,
can-
everyone's
can
included.
participate, yeah.
So it takes away that piece, and those folks who are reluctant will be there to hear.
Right.
They might not offer as much, but at least they'll hear and be a party to it. Because I think one of the things that we want to think about as we move forward is, what does team look like? So if we start with that team approach.
I'm in favor of that. You know, strategic planning is interesting, and I think it would be good in training, but I think before we're putting the cart before the horse, I think we start with the focus group, and then, you know, see your summary, get your thoughts, and then maybe find out that, hey, maybe we don't need training, or maybe we need to do this instead, or there might be another option available to us.
I just really encourage you, because I heard from a lot of participants, well, why should I participate? They're not going to do anything anyway. So there is a level of cognitive dissonance where they're expecting nothing to happen, and if we either choose to do nothing or move slowly, that reinforces their belief, and we end up doing more harm than good. So we don't want to get too wrapped up in, well, we need more information, we need more information, we need more information, because no matter what we find, we're going to be moving in the same direction, towards engagement and personal accountability. There's nothing that they're going to tell me in the focus groups that would change what I do here. Because this is going to take you in any positive direction that you could decide to go. Obviously, we'll build some things in that are customized to what we are here, but the prescription is going to be the same no matter what we find.
See, I guess some of that training with me I struggle with a little bit, being, the mayor and I just spoke about this, is that we have law enforcement and fire that get sent all over the country for leadership training, and then we have other departments that get none. So there's an unbalanced in leadership type training. So
one of the things that I find, and I'm working with the city of Mankato right now, that I've done leadership training with them for, gosh, going on 8, 9 years now. They are participating in, it's called lead trading. It stands for something else, but they send most of their supervisors down, I think, Virginia to go through a 3-day big deal. And what they found is, in doing that, the individual benefits, but the team does not. They come back more self-aware and more enlightened, but nothing changes at the day-to-day level. And so they called me back and they're like, you know, this is good stuff, but we feel like we've plateaued with where we can go with that. And now we need to incorporate that into our culture and our day-to-day work and our day-to-day conversations. And so the training that I would do is less about leadership and more about day-to-day conversations, decision-making, interactions. How do you communicate when someone's frustrated? How do you understand where they're coming from? So it's taking those leadership ideas but putting them into that day-to-day coaching implementation. And that's, I haven't been in a workplace in America that doesn't need more of that. So I'm going to predict you guys are normal.
I agree, but I still, it's hard for, employees become frustrated because we're not going to do anything, but I'm sitting here thinking, we need to find out what we need to do differently, and I'm not at that point where I think you are also, is I don't know what we need to do differently within the organization because I don't think we have enough information.
Okay, and that's fair. The personal leadership training for the employees, from the ones I talked to, that is really needed. It's a personal leadership in how do I manage my own emotions? How do I deal with my own personal frustrations from 8 years ago? because that's a personal thing. I, as a coach, if Dawn is holding on to something that happened 8 years ago, whether it was here or somewhere else, and she's got an emotional scar that is impacting her daily behavior, if I continue to try and coach her without dealing with that wound, it's not going to work. And so I can't fix her wound, she has to fix her own wound. And I met quite a few people that were wounded. And just in the time that I spent with them, I helped them realize no one's picking at that wound but you. You're using that to be more miserable. And that's impacting you, your family, your team workers, everybody, as much as it is your health and your job performance. And so the personal leadership is, how do I let go of that thing 8 years ago? Because I'm scared it's going to happen again. And anytime something remotely similar happens, it reinforces my belief that, yep, it's going to happen again. See, there it is. That's a personal thing that people have to really come to terms with. As an organization, there's nothing you can do systematically that's going to take those folks who end up being your loudest barkers, your loudest complainers, and help them self-reflect. The personal leadership is to help them self-reflect and kind of navigate their path forward, or decide that they can't fix the wound and a change is really needed. Because the culture we want to create is either stay, enjoy, or leave in peace, because there's not a third option of staying and being miserable. And the folks that I talk to, and yes, it's a specific group, it's not everyone, but there was a group that I spoke to that are choosing to stay and be miserable, and that's holding them back and their team. And that's not something you can address organizationally, that has to be addressed individually.
And I think sometimes that's the nature of government, that, I think in private sector it's easy to kind of weed some of that, I hate to say miserable people out, but in government, and it just seems,
Yeah.
but and maybe I'm all for personal accountability and those type of things.
Yeah.
And maybe as long as if we do the focus group and we're trying to, I still want all employees to be involved. I think everybody needs to take ownership in that, and maybe at that same time, provide leadership training, and we see what we have at the end of that. I don't know.
Well, and if I may, their EAP services have historically provided supervisory management training with a cross-section, not a very large group of managers or staff, but that's already included in our EAP services through Ascension. And I think that from a continuity or even just a personal health, that's more of a counseling service, it sounds like, than a leadership training and accountability on an issue or a wound. I mean, if you're using language around health and woundedness and that seems to me that the workplace solutions or employer solutions really needs to step in and provide that assistance. I mean, you're talking some professional, but the way I read, and I don't know if your tone or your language and your conclusions was meant to come across as that dire. I think maybe there were circumstances that did, but they made it into your conclusion, and so
they were pretty dire.
They were representative of the whole, though, Sarah, and I think that's the whole concern, is the employees that are going to participate long-term, are they working to solve or improve something that they also feel the same about or not? And I think that's where the credibility, I think, is, we have to earn some of that back as we move forward, if in fact we move forward with it.
That personal leadership training is good for all, but it's especially good for those that I met with. And yes, it wasn't a global perspective, but in my years of studying workplaces and researching, striving and surviving versus thriving, a small handful of folks who were as dire as the one that I met have 100 times greater impact on your culture than those that aren't dire.
Oh, sure. I think all of us have had workplace experiences and know that.
Yep.
I guess, are they willing, I mean, without forcing their hand or forcing someone's participation, which I don't think is healthy in some of the similar ways that were just mentioned here, how are those folks going to be able to get the assistance they need without breaching the confidentiality barrier that
Yep.
you know who those folks were, know their personal stories or significant issues that they may be raised. How are we going to connect the dots there?
And that's where the supervisor training and the personal leadership training come in. Because what this does is it teaches your coaches, and coaching is mandatory to really elevate your engagement. There's nothing you can do organizationally without great coaches that will drive engagement. But that's half the recipe. The other half is employees need to understand their role, understand their personal emotional intelligence, understand what personal accountability in the workplace looks like. I'm not going to come in and counsel them on their childhood. God, no, that would be a violation of ethics. But I am going to come in and coach them on their work experiences. You're right, there are folks who have work wounds from years past. And they're the only ones that are still obsessing on it. If that continues, nothing your coaches do or your organization does is going to change their cognitive dissonance about the way they feel. So I'm not going to come in and do psychotherapy, but I am going to come in and say, okay, what would need to happen tomorrow for you to let go of this? And they're going to start by saying, well, somebody would have to say sorry. And I'm going to say, well, who is that? Well, that person's no longer here. Okay, that's impossible. Your goal is to feel better. What you're telling yourself is going to make you feel better is impossible. That's a tough situation. So how are we going to get you back to personally accountable and staying in joy instead of staying in misery? Because when they stay in misery, the human condition wants to take their army down with them. And their army is the people they work around. And culturally, those folks, whether it's just a small handful or the majority, will suck your culture into the drain faster than anybody who's content. That sucks, but it's true. So my recipe for how to take us to a better place doesn't depend on where's our benchmark, where are we starting. And I think that's where you guys are wanting to debate of what's our benchmark. And I understand wanting to know that, but it's not going to change the prescription. Because the prescription to improve is going to be the same no matter where we're starting. So I told Dawn, instead of getting really wrapped up on how bad is it or how good is it, let's get focused on let's just make it better. The problems that we're trying to fix are fairly universal. It's about feeling cared about, it's about feeling empowered, and it's about feeling like you have a purpose. And most situations where someone is wounded or they're content want those three things. And so the prescription or the formula or the game plan, if you will, the winning game plan is going to be the same no matter where we're starting. Whether we're having a losing season or a winning season, the game plan is the same. And that's where you really have an impact. And I think we run the risk, and maybe I've already contributed that, but we run the risk of getting too wrapped up into what's wrong that we forget to start focusing on what's right, because we didn't hear from the people that wanted to share what's right, possibly. And so I think if we stop focusing on tell us what's wrong, and let's focus on what we want to be in the future, stop looking backwards and start looking forwards, that will go a long way to providing that feeling that people are cared about and valued and empowered and serving a purpose.
Yeah, and that's why I'm in favor of I personally am in favor of the employee focus group, everybody participating, and as long as we are meeting as a group, and we have these groups, at that time, the personal leadership training can be done at that time, and then we can reevaluate at that point. After that, we can take a look at your summary and see, because I do agree that I'm stuck on, I want to know what's wrong and what we can do to fix it. And maybe that's the fixer in me, but I still think we need these groups, we need these people to take part in this as a group. And then at that same time, we can discuss with them that personal leadership.
I can almost guarantee I never want to guarantee fully, but I can almost guarantee that when we come in and say, what would right look like, we're going to hear more about what's wrong. But if we come in and say what's wrong, that's what gets the attention, it gets reinforced subconsciously, and you end up having people say, see, I knew it was bad. You know, you end up going the wrong direction. So if we come in and say, let's talk about the future, what do you want the future to look like? We will still get a feel for what they don't want. But we will, whatever we give attention to, will have an impact on what they think and feel. So if we're giving attention to a better future, that will reinforce that, oh, they do want to make the place better.
Yeah, I think we have to do something, otherwise, obviously, I think it's going to go even worse. Or, you know, it's going to slide even further. And so that's just my thought. I don't know what the rest of the committee, how you guys feel, but
I feel,
well, and you bring quite an administrator background. So.
this is the same as a school or school system, to be perfectly honest.
We're all humans.
I would kind of agree to the focus group. I agree with you what you're saying. And then let the rest of it come from that. In other words, we don't know what kind of strategic planning we're going to need. We don't know what kind of coaching we're going to need. So if we made a motion tonight, I would be comfortable only to look. I agree with the focus groups and get them engaged and so forth. And from that, with that information, we can go forward and build, rather than saying we're going to do this and this and all of it.
Right.
That's all my comfort level would be there.
And I agree with you. The thing we want to try and be careful of, though, because there's a chance it could go this direction, is letting the employees decide what's next. And I know that feels right because that makes them empowered, but if you went into a neighborhood and said to your residents, we've got $100,000, how do you want to spend it? They might not spend it appropriately because they're not experts in that.
No, I'm not saying that. I think the common council and department heads can get together and talk about the next step.
Okay, sure.
But we need the data, the information to determine
Right.
what the next step would be. And so that's how
Okay.
I guess my only thought was, you know, that leadership training, since we already had them together as a group, you know, I thought two birds with one stone, but I agree with you though. I think we need to identify.
how many hours it's, okay, here's the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
I'm a department head and you're gonna have focus groups. I got jobs to be done.
Right,
You
yeah,
know what
that's
I
a good point.
So it seems to me there's only so much time and also what the city has to accomplish. And to be practical,
And I know the street department, they have major street projects starting.
We
you know,
have to break up that department.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't all,
Yeah.
Right.
no,
Can't all be
Right,
the
but
you
same.
know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's
So I
still,
think-
it's fall and there's still a lot
And
of,
then leadership.
lot of good time.
And you bring up a good point,
That's a
because
good
I
point.
think you said doing the leadership training at the same time, the personal leadership training really fits with number 4. This isn't somebody else's work, what work are you gonna do?
Right.
So
There may be some opportunities to at least start this
Yeah,
at that level.
right.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that also, and I just think we need more than 25. We need to hear from more than 25.
Yeah.
And even the breakup of that 25, I think you said it was almost half employees, half management, and so that's really a small employee group.
I do
too.
feel I got an isolated
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
Yep, and I think, yeah, I don't want it to skew the whole employee group either, you know, that this is what all the employees feel.
And I do think starting at the department level is valid because, especially in a city like this, you know, the perspective of a first responder, although just as important as a city worker, first responders deal with a whole different level of circumstances that have an emotional impact on the work they do. I've found that first responders have a sense of team that goes way beyond anything else that happens in Parks and Rec. So I think there are dynamics that will come out. We still need to look at it organizationally, but we also need to honor the differences in those departments.
Oh, absolutely. Joe?
Fine, I just, one thing I took away from the presentation was that it seemed pretty much across the board, the employees did not like council meddling in day-to-day activities. I just wanna be careful we didn't do that, but no, otherwise.
Yeah, I'm curious to find out, learn about that relationship or lack thereof, because obviously we all get employee phone calls, so, they don't want us meddling, but then they call us because they want us to meddle. and-
That's where that personal leadership comes in.
You know, and
That's
it's
it, yep,
really-
yep. And-
Realistically, and-
When you start with what does great look like, they're gonna say, well, great looks like the council's role being this and the employee role being this. Well, then when they cross those boundaries, we can come back and say, we agreed that we were gonna be like this. How is this situation different? That's where that personal leadership thing is. And you have to have coaches that can reinforce that. So say they said, well, we want city council members not to get involved in day-to-day situations. Well, then you have an employee that comes to their supervisor and says, I'm gonna call the city council because of X, Y, and Z. The coach can say, we defined greatness as dealing with our situations ourselves. If we need the council's input, would you like me to call them? And that gives your coaches some tools to deal with those situations.
Well, no, I might be getting a little ahead of ourselves here too, but I mean, our role is really defined by our districts and the electorate, not, the employees, and certainly the employees are our responsibility. But I don't know that we can't really change what our job is.
I'm talking more about managing expectations than
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
You're right, you're absolutely right. But if they come and they say, well, we want the council only to get involved when we ask them, that doesn't mean that's what they get.
Right.
That means that's what they believe to be the right thing now, and we have to manage that differently. And we have to come back through the personal leadership and say, that's not how it works. So if you continue to expect it to work that way, you're going to continue to be frustrated. Because the council's role given to them through the city is X, Y, Z. Now let's talk about how you perceive that. Well, I think that's stupid. Okay, well that's not going to change. So you can either get on board, or we can find a place where you can, don't have to deal with that, which would probably be outside the company. Because you're going to continue to beat your head against the wall if you're expecting that to change. I'm just giving you examples.
Sure.
I'm not saying this is the conversation I would have,
Right.
but that's the type of coaching conversation that promotes that personal accountability. Once we've said, okay, here's the role of the council. What are your expectations of them beyond that? Or within that? And if they say, well, greatness means that they're available to me when at the drop of a hat, okay, is that realistic? And we help manage their expectations. So yes, I agree with you. We're not going to come in and say, the employees want this, you guys have to change. It's more managing their expectations, because the reason they said it's not a great place to work is because they have expectations that aren't being met that are probably unrealistic. So giving them what they want isn't the answer. Managing their expectations is.
Yeah, and I think even down the line of further discussion with strategic planning, like the mayor and I talked about, because, yeah, it's clear, council might go in one direction, mayor and staff go in another direction, and it just never works out very well. And so I think, and that's a discussion we can have down the road, but
And
it would be nice to
that's-
see us all come together on a project, and we're all, the staff and the council agrees that this is the direction we need to go, and, we don't unfortunately have that right now. And I don't think we have that one project or that goal, and that's down the road, but
One of the characteristics of a thriving organization is that they have a leadership team, which is you all here, that doesn't necessarily agree, but at the end of the day comes up with a vision and is committed to it and provides leadership at all levels for that. So yes, there's disagreement. Yes, there's difference in opinions. Yes, there's politics. But once a decision is made, then the mayor has to come and administrate that decision. If we continue to waffle and explore and evaluate, the employees are in limbo.
Right.
And that causes that frustration.
So I guess to get things moving, I'll make a motion that we retain Sarah for doing the employee focus groups. And then guess, yeah, that'd be my motion that we,
As stated, yeah.
as stated in her outline, her proposal.
Can I discuss one thing?
Yep,
Um,
and I was gonna,
Yeah, I had put a cost on there, assuming
Yeah.
it was a couple.
well, and I was gonna
groups.
ask about, and I was gonna, actually, I forgot to ask, because that probably would adjust that cost, because
Yep.
now we're doing every employee.
Right.
And we're including that.
It's
so-
not gonna be a drastic change, but it will be more meetings, so I'll need to look at how many meetings it is.
Yeah,
Um,
and
Do you need a price to be able to vote?
we probably should have that included.
Well,
I would
like
correct
not
it.
to exceed,
At
probably.
least by the time of council,
Or
I
by
guess.
council.
Do you think not to exceed is acceptable, Sue?
Sure.
Or we
She
should-
Can you
Say
just?
that.
Or do you
amend
want to,
Yes.
or give it by council, or
Can we say not to exceed 7, but it probably won't come in at that,
7? No.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to exceed 7?
plus travel? Okay.
Yeah, because I figured that, reading that as a, groups versus every employee.
I think just to be prudent, we should just have a caveat that, obviously have to identify funding source. Tim's not here, of course, but I imagine that wouldn't be difficult,
Right.
but,
I will do my best to work with you.
Yeah.
Obviously, the more meetings, the more commitment, but we'll try to be fiscally responsible.
Yep.
I'll second the motion.
So I have a motion and a second to retain Sarah to conduct employee focus groups, all employee focus groups, for a cost not to exceed 7,000 plus travel costs
Can we put on there in Q4?
in Q4, quarter 4.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, she said a second, so.
So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. So the next item is set next meeting date. We always run into court with Wednesdays. Not that I just enjoy having a meeting every Tuesday, but I don't know if we want to move maybe to the second Tuesday so that we can get down in the third floor conference, or the first floor conference room, and we don't have a issue with court, and I don't know, what do you think about,
October 8th?
because it's like, then we have a meeting every Tuesday, well, 3 Tuesdays.
Yeah, just set aside Tuesdays for that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do in my calendar. All Tuesdays are set up for meetings, whether or not we have them. So what do you think, October 8th? Yeah,
I can make it work.
is that
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock? Does that work, Joe, or is that?
No, that'd be great.
Okay.
Five's just fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just so that we get off this Wednesday and
Yep.
helps with our CCA and all the cameras down there. and-
Yeah.
Okay, so October 8th, 5 PM. Last item on the agenda is adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion to adjourn.